Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? Hey, Siri, is my audio coming through?
Yes, I can hear you. I was actually just about to wonder, I was just about to message you to see if you could hear me.
Yeah, I think I can hear everyone on the call. Why don't we give another minute for anyone else to settle in? But I think we're good to pretty good to start.
Okay.
Thank you guys so much for coming to this conversation, this discussion. Um, I know we've had a lot going on in this dev program, and I am also loving the fact that I can't figure out how to get my slide deck up after spending so much time on this thing. All right, is the screen up?
Yes.
Yes, we can see it.
All right, so we're reaching a point in the dev program where we are going to have, where it's going to get pretty close to the launch of the Sensor 3. We wanted to take some time now that we're here to talk about what's going on and what's next for the Dev Kit program, and then answer any questions that you have. I'm sure there will be a few of them. I'll try to keep this pretty brief. So when we started the program, what we were hoping to do would be a pretty smooth process between pushing dev updates to you that would then get pushed to the private personal to the PVT sensors. That's the general release sensors. And most at the beginning, that was mostly the case. But as time went on, there was a divergence between the two systems where the PVT sensors required more attention. The good news, though, is that we have been able to resolve most of those questions, and we're very confident the PVT should be ready to release in the next week. So I wanted to talk a little bit more about that and what that means for you in the dev kit program. So while we were working on this project, we did get to a point where the DVT SDK, the one that you were using, reached a limitation that meant that we couldn't get to you the features that we want. There were a couple of ways we could get around it, but the best one from a user perspective standpoint is to just get you PVT sensors before anybody else. And the way we're going to do that is that the first of these are arriving in our office on Friday, September 6th, and then we are going to immediately ship copies of them to all of you. We're also going to make you give you access to the brand new fully released SDK 3.1. You've only been using the alpha version, but as of Friday, that's going to change. And this new sensors that we're going to give you are going to have all of the features that we promised in phase 2 and 3, calibration and color tracking, presets, use with the calibration app and the structure app, and also the auto exposure and low power mode. This is not how I wanted it to play out, in the sense that I know all of you have applications that you want to be ready for the time sensors are in your customers' hands. We do think that that's still attainable, and it's definitely still attainable that you'll have structure technology like the Sensor 3 and the new SDK in your hands a bit way before your customers do. But we are also going to be on our end, we're going to be amping up any additional support we can have from your team to help with any of the apps that you're currently working on. Our CEO likes to phrase this as Dan will help update any app. But what that means to me is basically one of four different things. I can help you individually to address coding issues, like I have currently for several of you. I can set up live consultations with either me or our developers for helping code your applications. I can test things before you release them to customers as sort of an additional customer experience person. And I can help you with approving any apps that need to go through the app approval process. If you're building something new, for example, it would have to go through the approval process. That's something that I can help with. And finally, we don't want the DVT sensor to become a paperweight. While we had to shunt resources from upgrading the DVT sensor, we are going to back update it in the next week or so to work with the sensor to basically at the same level as a PVT sensor. And why we're doing this is that going forward, we're hoping that it wouldn't serve you guys as a dedicated testing unit. In addition to being a chance to play with the new hardware, now you have something that you can use for testing with your applications going forward. The timeline for all of this is that on September 6th, we're going to start shipping the sensors to you as fast as we can. You're all going to receive the new SDK 3.1 in your portal. You're going to get it several days to a week before anyone else does. I'm available as extra support starting now. Same with the rest of my company. And we're here to help with any messaging to your partner, to your clients, to make sure that they don't they don't try to use the Sensor 3 with one of your applications before you've gotten the fully built SDK 3.1 in there. And that is all I have for announcements from us. I would like to turn over the rest of the time to questions. And there's only a few of us here. I've enabled talk for all of you. I'm hoping to just take anyone who wants to talk. You can raise your hand or just jump in and we'll answer any questions we can. All right. Marcel, what can I do for you?
Yeah, hi Dan. What's the official release of the SDK? 3.1 or 3.11 as you showed before? Maybe you can give a little bit more update on the roadmap of the SDK.
Yeah, sure. The official designation, the one you're going to see in your portals, and the one that is going to be in the release notes is still SDK 3.1. The difference, SDK 3.11 was a bit of a title. It was a typo. It was an internal thing to keep track of the difference between SDK 3.1 alpha, which is the version that you have, and the original SDK 3.1. So thank you for asking that. It is SDK 3.1. That's the one that's coming out on Friday.
Okay, but exactly 100% the same functionality as alpha, or like many changes since alpha version and then now the official release?
That's where the extra help testing things from us comes in. So we do expect that it's not going to have any. Functionally, it should be better than SDK Alpha. We have solved most of the technical problems. There is one that I do want to address after I'm going to say for the next paragraph, Marcel. But the SDK 3.1 will have additional support features in them. I believe that should include presets, that should include support for Calibrator and the structure app. Also, from the last notes I had, that also included support for auto exposure, but I do need to, auto exposure and yeah, that's let's see, what was the other one that we had on our list? And low power mode, right? So I believe it already has a version of low power mode already. The point is, presets and SDK and calibration support are the main things that are coming with the next SDK. And right, so the thing about any sort of, there have been a couple of issues with the sensor that we've noticed with we've noticed that we will have to be part of address and release after SDK 3.1. The chief one, the current one that I have, is the only one that I have really is for some users, the apps needs to be started before the user plugs the phone into the device, the sensor into the device. That's not universal, but it is something that we're still tracking down. And I wanted to bring it up at this time. Anything else, Marcel?
No, thank you. I think just gonna look at the details, but just as an overview, that helps. Thank you.
Of course. Anything I can answer for you, Jorg or Vincent?
No, I think the issue that we had was resolved now. However, that happened with the test flight version of the scanner app, because that worked with the sensor that we have here, and now our scanner app is also working.
All right, I am glad to hear that. I'm not aware of I'm not aware of that your precise way of getting rid of the bug happening to anyone else, because you were kind of in a unique position that most of the people didn't get to try try out one of our test flight builds. You all can, by the way, but it seems like I haven't heard I don't have any records for the apps failing to build in any case. Where I'm going with this is I have not seen it work basically where you switch between one SDK 3.1 app and another SDK 3.1 app before. I'm curious to see if that will be a general solution to the problem or not and what that says, but I'm going to do some more research on it. For now, I'm just glad that you're able to get it working.
One thing that I realized is that the battery level doesn't seem to be correctly
Yes.
reported by the SDK.
I'm glad you brought that up. That is exclusive to the DVT, and I've been assured multiple times will not be an issue in the PVT units at all.
Right.
It basically comes down to the feedback the sensor is supposed to be getting. It should be getting feedback to tell battery percentage, but it's only getting feedback on whether their battery has charge in it at all, which is why it's 1. If it was out of charge, it would be 0 or also dead.
Right.
It was kind of fun figuring that part out. But yeah, I can promise all of you guys on the call that shouldn't be an issue with the sensors with shipping on Friday.
Right.
Anything else, Marcel?
Yes, regarding the hardware. So, what do you have a list of changes between the DVT and the PVT version of the hardware or the firmware? Because in the past we had some issue that we already also shared with you, that you did some changes but did not update the firmware version. So do you have a new firmware version on the mass production series? And that's the first question. And second one, what's the change log between now the first sensor that we have and the ones that we get shipped soon?
1 second, I'm writing that down. So the DVT sensor is different from the PVT sensor. That's correct. There is new firmware for the PVT sensor, which was one of the reasons for this split that we had. As it has been explained to me so far, is basically a difference between the circuit board that was used in the DVT sensor and the one that will be used in the final build. But what that change is exactly and what kind of firmware changes were needed to update on the new one versus the old one, I don't have for you a list for you now. I also need to get you a list of some of the other differences between the DVT unit and the PVT unit. The PVT unit, for instance, has a different way of connecting has basically a better way of connecting the ports than the ports system than the DVT sensor did. But what that means for you, what that exactly means, I need some more information. So I'm making a note to get a DVT versus PVT list difference. And I'm also making a note for the firmware version. And I know that gonna need to get a list of features in that firmware version.
Yeah, that would help a lot because, otherwise, I mean, we only get the PVT versions like maybe in, more than 1 week in Europe. So then, I mean, we can test now and then we can test on Friday or next week, we can test the DVT version with the official SDK 3.1 release, but then we still don't know if that works also for the PVT version. So I think that would help if to track the changes between the SDK releases, first of all, and then also between the hardware and firmware version differences between the different updates. That would help a lot to keep track. And please also include any known issues in the release notes of the SDK and the firmware of the sensor and the hardware, because that was also an issue in the past that we had to figure out ourselves what was the problem, and was not reported as a known issue.
That is
true. So I think that would help. That would help a lot. I'm sure, I mean, there's no new development without bugs, so that's clear. But we need to know it. So we need to know everything that from a development point of view, and what's still buggy. Then we can follow that.
And they're definitely going to release SDK release notes for the firmware notes and the latest firmware version. I do need that, and that is definitely something that has to exist because the firmware version on the sensor is about 0.1 currently. So it's got to be. I can't imagine it's going to be that same one today. So regardless, we'll get notes on the firmware. What we can, we will get the SDK release as well for the 3.1 notes. There is going to be an issue update on the website, and that you'll all receive. Currently, the only issue that we've had related to the SDK that we've seen with customers is the issue with sometimes the sensor not being recognized when it was getting plugged in. And that has usually been cleared by starting the application and then plugging the sensor in. In fact, in one form or another, that has managed to clear it all the time. But there could be additional issues besides. I know both you and I know all three of you have reported additional issues to me that I have added into the development workflow to get patched, but I will need to get an update on whether that stuff is getting done immediately or whether there's still going to be issues going forward. Either way, I should have an email with that information for you by Friday at the absolute latest. I'm going to try to shoot for Thursday afternoon, if that works for everyone here.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? Okay. Cool. Well, you all have my phone number and email if you'd like to get a hold of me. I'll follow up after this meeting with the updated information around the SDK release, and we'll also be in touch with you shortly to coordinate the details of shipping your dev kits, shipping your production units. If you have any other questions or concerns, just let me know. And thanks again for being part of the dev program. All of your insight has been very valuable. I have been collecting it this entire time, and it's been really good feedback for the engineering team. So thank you again for all of the help you've given us and for continuing to develop with Structure. And I really hope you enjoy your new production units. I've seen a couple of them and they're pretty sweet. Not gonna lie.
Good. Thank you.
Great. Thanks.
All right. Take care, everyone. Cheers.
Cheers. Bye.